everyone. We're so excited to see so many people here to learn about bugs and Project Bigwood. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Amanda with Project Bigwood. I'm the executive director. All of our staff's here. We're really here to hear from the bug expert Jackson with the Salmon Fly Project, but before we get started, if you want to put a bid in, this is your last chance. Once Jackson speaks, it's over and it'll be closed. And then I just want to give a quick shout out to Sawtooth Brewery for hosting us, and Gene and Rio for all the setup they did today. And here's Jackson with the Salmon Fly Project.
Can everybody hear me if I don't hold the mic? Are we good? Is that fine?
Yes.
All right. I don't like mics. All right. Thanks again, everybody, for coming, and thanks to Project Bigwood for having me here today. I'm really excited to share with you more about our project on the Bigwood River, what we've been doing as far as our research and our monitoring goes. Before I get to the project itself, though, I want to talk a bit about the Salmon Fly Project, just to introduce our organization as we're new in the Valley. But I'm the executive director of the Salmon Fly Project. I founded it in the last year of my PhD in 2022. And we are the only aquatic insect or hatch conservation nonprofit in the US. We founded this organization because despite all of the observations about declining aquatic insects in the angling world and the science that backs it up, there really hasn't been a major effort across the nation or across the West to quantify those trends in different watersheds and to integrate the bugs that we care about into management, into restoration. And that's really the bread and butter of the Salmon Fly Project, is to provide that science, collaborate with great watershed groups like this and with others, with government agencies, whoever, to do important bug conservation. Quick shout out to my co-founder. Sorry, it's a little bit blurry. James Frakes, he couldn't be here today. He's rocking it out in Denver. So let's get buggy. Before I get into kind of the nitty-gritty science and the monitoring stuff, I like to get everybody on the same page as far as the aquatic insects. Who here would consider themselves a passionate angler, fly fisher? Yeah, these people are shy, but maybe half the room. All right. So if that's true, then I really do got to hammer this out. So we're here to preserve the watershed, but the aquatic insects really represent the core of the ecosystem, and I'm going to talk about them and explain, no matter who you are, why you can get behind aquatic insect conservation. So what are aquatic insects? They're insects, of course. They start from eggs. Their immature stage, before they become winged adults, is in the water, right? They're feeding, they're growing, that's their sole purpose. Eventually, they come out of the water as winged adults, just like a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, right? These guys go from a wingless individual into a winged one. That's the adult, they reproduce. Females lay the eggs back in the water and the cycle starts over again. And in the angling world, there's really four large groups of aquatic insects, I should say, that we really hone in on. This is what the trout love to eat the most. So the first group that I'll mention is the mayflies. This group represents 3,500 species. You might remember hatches like blue-winged olives and green drakes and trichos. The list goes on and on. But these are really cool bugs. They're actually the most ancient kind of flying insect in the world. They predate the dinosaurs, they predate flowers, they predate North America. They're really old, and they're very sensitive to environmental degradation. The stoneflies, another 3,500 species. We're showing here the salmon fly. A lot of people think that salmon flies are different than stoneflies. They're just one kind of stonefly. And this group as a whole, if you average it out, is the most sensitive of all to environmental change. They're kind of the canary in the coal mine. If things start to change, you'll have species of stonefly tend to get kicked out first, right? Other kinds of stoneflies, golden stones, nocturnals, yellow sallies, other famous hatches. We also have caddis. These things are really cool. They're really closely related to moths and butterflies. And just like moths and butterflies, most of the larvae can spin silk. And they spin that silk to surround themselves with rocks and sticks, and that protects them from invertebrate insects that might like to eat them. or they make nets, just like spiders. They make underwater spider webs, and they live in funnels of nets and filter feed off of those nets. They're really cool species. 17,000 species, and I think that's ironic because when you look at the hatch chart, we usually have Mother's Day caddis in the spring, October caddis in the fall, and then the whole summer is just caddis. But really, there's dozens and dozens of species of caddis on the Big Wood River and any other. We also have true flies. This includes midges, black flies. That's not really a fishable hatch. Mosquitoes, if you fish alpine lakes, that's a big one. But midges and crane flies are the main groups in our rivers. Super speciose, 50,000 species of true flies, mega diverse. They're hard to ID under the scope. And this is the group that's most resilient to pollution or kinds of environmental change. So as things get polluted, generally you see a shift away from mayflies, stoneflies, caddis towards true flies and other kinds of non-insects, scuds, for instance, worms, leeches. All right, so when all of these insects live in the water, they are on and under the rocks. And all of these different species feed on different food resources. Some shred up leaves, they break down the woody material, and they release those nutrients for other critters. Others scrape algae off of the rocks. Others are predators. Others filter feed. And when you have all of this, what we call functional diversity, it keeps the river functioning how it should. It keeps it running clean and healthy. Another reason why aquatic insects are important, if you count up all of the species in fresh water on Earth, 70%, over 70% of them are insects. So we have this joke in entomology, if you round up, everything's an insect. And that's of course a joke, but it's really true. The vast majority of the biodiversity of the world and our rivers is made up of the insects. Insects also feed the trout that we like to catch, of course, as well as other fish species, sculpin, dace, things like that. They feed a host of different birds, but it's through this connection with fish and fly fishing where insects really are so recreationally important, are economically important. They support our small town industries. And you just can't have fly fishing without the flies, right? Our sport would disappear. So here's kind of the more depressing turn and where the Salmon Fly Project really comes into play. What happens when so many anglers and scientists begin to notice declines in the abundance of our hatches? Hatches is the emergence of these insects out of the water as winged adults. What happens when the insects begin to decline? And unfortunately, that's what a lot of anglers have noticed, and it's backed by science. And I want to show you just a little bit of the data, right? I want to talk a lot about our project on the Big Wood, so I'm not going to dive deep into this, but you need to know, right? So the best available study, this is blurry, on the United States trends for aquatic insects came out in 2023. And what this group of scientists did, there was about 30 of them from a bunch of different government agencies, universities. They compiled essentially all of the government data on aquatic insects. A lot of branches of the US government, like the EPA, state level, DEQ, USGS, they collect data on aquatic insects for water quality monitoring. And they assembled 6,500 sites worth of bug data. And they drew a trend line through it. They looked at density, that's kind of abundance per unit area, so think per square foot, per square meter, over time. And they found that aquatic insects were declining on average across the nation a little over 1% per year. The study went from 98 to 2018, 23% loss of abundance over that relatively short time period. Average site diversity, so number of species per site, declined by 7% over that time period. So when you talk to old-time anglers and they say, it ain't what it used to be, it's not just like faulty memory or the good old days are always better, you're right? There's the science is backing what all these guys are noticing. And even some of our most important, famous hatches are declining. One example, the salmon fly. We of course do conservation with all of our hatches. Salmon flies are kind of a flagship species for us. Think of them as our panda bear, right? But we and other scientists have documented the decline of this bug across 14 blue ribbon and gold medal trout streams in the western U.S. Even streams like the Madison, the Yellowstone, the Upper Snake, really famous pieces of water that we think of as relatively pristine, have undergone declines in this bug as well as others. I forgot to add this in. 84% decline in salmon flies in Utah in just 22 years. We got them listed in Utah as a state endangered species. That's not federally listed. That's like a state acknowledgement of their endangerment within Utah only. In Montana, kind of the hot spot for salmon flies, as most people think, 65 to 89% decline since the 1970s. So pretty spooky stuff for this bug and kind of a rallying point for us for aquatic insect conservation. So a lot of the time when people learn about these bug declines or they observe them, they think, where's the action? And they usually assume that government agencies, whether that's your Idaho Fish and Game, U.S. Forest Service, whoever, or your local watershed groups, big groups like Trout Unlimited, are doing something about it. And I'm not pointing the blame here, but the answer is they're not. And the reason for that is their hands are tied. They don't have the data. If you're a local fisheries biologist and you are aware of this issue and you want to do something about it on the Big Wood, you don't care what's happening nationwide. You need data on the Big Wood River, right? And that data in different watersheds just does not exist. We don't have data on the status, the trends, threats, solutions, and that's what the Salmon Fly Project does. We collaborate with agencies, watershed groups, larger nonprofits to generate the data that we need to conserve the aquatic insects, to uphold our aquatic biodiversity, our food webs, our trout populations, and our dry fly fishing opportunities. So since 2022, really since 2023, that's really our full-time launch, we now have research and monitoring programs across 6 states. We have 13 projects, one of which is, of course, here. And we're really excited to be working with Project Big Wood to establish an annual monitoring program on this special piece of water. So we started this program in 2024 when Amanda reached out to us. She had been, their team had already been starting a habitat or water quality monitoring program, and they wanted to add bugs to the mix. And I want to give a little bit of historical context. You're all locals, and you've seen this more than me. Don't pay attention to that. That's more for me, for reminding me. But you've seen the population growth here. You've seen less water in the river, and there's a lot of concern about that. How healthy is the watershed? Is the fishery declining? Are the bugs declining? How bad and why? These are the kinds of questions we want to answer through the monitoring program. And what this stuff is talking about is your local DEQ, your state Department of Environmental Quality, has already acknowledged that some stretches of the Big Wood and the tributaries are already known as impaired, right? So the state has these published thresholds where your different water quality characteristics should fall under, whether that's temperature, its sediment levels, its flows, its bug health. And they have listed the Big Wood from Siemens Creek down to Magic Reservoir as impaired for breaches in all of these conditions, different nutrients, there's too much sediment, not enough flow, even E. coli, as well as even high up areas in these tributaries on Warm Springs and East Fork Creek. So we already know that there are some issues here that aren't just hearsay, they're validated by an agency, and we want to know more, we want to quantify it. So we can, as Big Wood would say, Project Big Wood, we can mend it, right? So the overall project goals is to generate data on the status and trends of insects, habitat, and water quality, therefore identify solutions, share that data, be collaborative, and then implement change through restoration, improved management, education to protect this watershed for generations to come. So with Project Big Wood, we selected now 12 sites throughout the watershed. The site numbering is a little bit confusing because things are spread out on the tributaries as well. But our uppermost site on the Big Wood River starts at Easley. We go down through now this year below Magic Reservoir, so 6 sites on the main stem, and then we have 2 sites on each of these tributaries, Warm Springs, East Fork, and Trail Creek. We have 1 site above all of the development and 1 right next to the confluence to try and integrate all of the effects of everything that's going on. So the two parts to the monitoring program, as I've already touched on, first, this quantitative macroinvertebrate, I'll say bug sampling. That's different than insects because we're also collecting the worms, the leeches, the invertebrates that aren't insects, and then all of our habitat parameters. And I'll quickly just blast through this. So we have a lot of different hatches that we care about in the river, a lot of different bug diversity. And when we sample aquatic insects, we get down in these riffles and we shove this sampler into the ground and we disturb the rocks and the bugs get washed into our net. And from that, we can derive all sorts of really useful metrics. So I've already touched on how aquatic insects can be used as indicators of water quality. We can identify all the bugs in the water, enumerate them, and because different species are associated or can tolerate different levels of pollution, we can tally up all of the species' individual water quality tolerance scores and come up with an average estimation of water quality for that particular site. So that's one reason why we're monitoring the bugs, or one way we're using that bug data is to create these water quality scores. We also look at bug biodiversity and the abundances of what we call our game species, basically our fishable hatches. Quick pictures of what this looks like. The net we use is back there. It's this wacky contraption. It's a steel drum with a net flowing there. We shove this in the substrate. It makes a seal. So insects in that perfect 1 square foot frame can't flow out. Drifting insects can't get in. And then all of the bugs wash into our net. We throw that into a sieve. All of the life is in there, and then we bottle it up. And then all winter long, our taxonomist is identifying the bugs and enumerating them. All right, so then habitat, what are we looking at? So there's 4 main, what we call, the 4 big ones. As far as changing habitat characteristics, generally the issues are usually tied to flows, temperature, nutrient levels, and sediment loading, sedimentation. So I'll just touch really briefly on probably the most important one, and I'll tell you right now, you might have changes in temperature, and surely you do, or higher nutrient levels, maybe even some sedimentation, but when I look at your river and I look at the data, I see a lot of good fisheries with higher temperatures, way worse nutrient levels, and more sedimentation than you're looking at. Your sediment might be getting a little bit towards bad on some of these reaches, but dewatering is the big one on the Big Wood. So the other night I downloaded all the USGS data from Haley. So USGS data has been collecting temperature or flow data summertime, July 1st through September 30th from 2006 to onward to present. And just over that 19 years, you're looking at a mean summer flow reduction by 20%. So a little over 1% per year. And that's going to be river-wide, mostly that kind of reduction, because this is mostly driven off of drought, changes in snowpack and precipitation cycles, earlier melt-off, plus all this increased municipal use, some degree agriculture down low, but that might have remained, similar over time. You also have these really sad and interesting dewatering events lower down in the river. And I don't know if you guys have noticed the satellite imagery. If I zoom back, I don't know if my resolution's good enough. You can see this riparian belt. It's all green, green, green. What is that, right? What is going on there? I remember the first time I noticed that. And that is the remnants, basically. So in the summertime, all of the water that hits Glendale Bridge gets sucked out for ag and then gets pumped down with a lot less water in it down to Stanton Crossing. But you have about 6 miles of river that in the summertime, there's just no water in it. And you go down there and there's fish dead or dying in all these pools, tons of dried up bugs all over the place. And so the dewatering can happen via either of those routes, but it's only, extremely bad on that section. And I won't go into this, but we all know that all this increased human development can lead to sedimentation, all the construction, silt, sand comes into the water. all of the nutrients from people watering their lawns and everything like that. That gets into the water, has an impact, less water in the river, warmer temperatures. So this isn't really the main part of my talk, but we're collaborating with Project Bigwood to help them monitor these aspects of water quality as well. But I really want to dig into the bug stuff in this talk with the remaining time I have. So hopefully now you understand the what and the why of the monitoring project. We only have 1 year of data. Miles and I just finished the 2nd year of data collection today. We've been here all week sampling at all 12 sites. And I want to show you what the bug data shows from a water quality perspective and then kind of like a hatch angler perspective. So I'm going to break this down. On the x-axis, we have all of our sites. We only had 4 mainstem bigwood sites last year, so easily down through Stanton Crossing. On the y-axis, we have this metric called percent EPT. Don't look at that right now, just listen, right? Percent EPT is what we use as the percent of the bug community represented by mayflies, stoneflies, and caddis. So 100% EPT would mean everything is a mayfly, stonefly, or caddis. 10% EPT would mean 10% of the bugs are a mayfly, a stonefly, or a caddisfly. And we use this as an indication of water quality because these bugs tend to be not so tolerant of different kinds of pollution. So we can look at the variation in your sites of percent EPT. And generally, things look really great from this perspective. All of your mainstem sites are above what we would call an impairment threshold for percent EPT. And for me, anything above 60% is really, really good, right? So most of your sites, including all of your mainstem sites, have a lot of mayflies, stoneflies, or caddis. That's good. The one really scary one, holy smokes, Lower Trail Creek. If you go down there by the walking path and head off like to the right near the bridge, one of the bridges down there, you'll go to our site and it's just like full of fine sediment. There's not much water in there. It looks pretty nasty, and it's no surprise why there's like a lot of leeches and a lot of worms, a lot of midges, and not your sensitive taxa. So this metric, the IDEQ, Idaho DEQ Biointegrity Index, this is a bit more complicated. And I'm not going to break it all down, but it is what's called a multi-metric index. And what it does, it integrates lots of different metrics, biodiversity, percent EPT, what we just talked about, and others into a single number. It's like a way of looking at all sorts of different metrics in one shot. So this might be the best way to look at water quality from a bug perspective. And here's the Idaho DEQ's impairment threshold. When things, if it's below that, it's looking not so good. Stanton Crossing is below the threshold. That's not a surprise. That's an impaired site according to DEQ. So we would expect that the different metrics would come out as these bugs are there. They're tolerating a lot of poor water quality. The sensitive species has kicked out. That's not really a surprise. What was really surprising in the data is that Upper Trail Creek was below the threshold. That's above any development. So there's an interesting story there that we've got to dig into more. So we just sampled this site again, and I'm going to be really interested to see if it also shows this same problem, or if it was a one-year anomaly. It's possible to get one-year anomalies. Maybe the site we sampled, someone had like a kid's birthday party there, 2 days before, and all the rocks were trampled. Who knows? It didn't look like that, or else we wouldn't have sampled there. But more data will kind of solidify what's going on there. Lower Trail Creek was absolutely our worst site. And it's not really surprising when you just look at the overall quality of that ecosystem. But general conclusion, 7 of the 10 sites look good from a bug water quality perspective, 3 not so good. Stanton, not really a surprise, and we're going to definitely keep our eye open on the Trail Creek. Boolean was also kind of close to that threshold, so we're going to keep an eye on that one as well. If you have questions about that stuff, fire away after the talk. I want to get to kind of the more species buggy stuff. So moving away from water quality, looking at just bugs for bugs' sake. which if you're an angler, you're gonna care about because you wanna fish those hatches. The most abundant species on the Big Wood River and the tributaries, here are the top 5. Black flies, not a fishable hatch, and this isn't really a bad thing. You see this in a lot of water. This isn't really concerning to me. But the remaining, the next 3 really common fishable hatches, spotted sedges. This is your main summer caddis hatch. And this represents a bunch of different species that are coming off from really June through September. March browns, as the name would suggest, they come off in the spring, really cool mayfly. Blue-winged olives as well, BWOs, super prolific hatch in a lot of rivers, as well as riffle beetles. And we don't really fish those. They're like size 24 itty bitty things, but they are pretty cool. So what I wanted to do next is to put this in perspective. A lot of the time when we look at our rivers, we see declining hatches, we look at poor water quality stuff, and we start to freak out. What's happening to my river? And I want to put the bug data, some metrics that you understand, and compare them to other big name fisheries so you kind of can understand where you're sitting. So here we have percent EPT, percent of the community made by mayflies, stoneflies, and caddis. We have the Big Wood River, the Henry's Fork, the Upper Snake, and the Madison, and you can see we're right in the mix, right? We're above the Henry's Fork for percent EPT and a little under the Upper Snake and Madison River. So from a basin perspective, we are still dominated by these good fishable hatches, just like these other amazing fisheries. This is just density of all macroinvertebrates, density of fish food, essentially. This represents the insects that make hatches as well as worms and scuds and stuff like that. Per square foot on the Big Wood, you're at about 1,800 individual bugs per square foot. That's a lot of bugs, all right? I want you to think about that for a minute. When you flip over a rock in your garden, do you see 1,800 individual bugs? No, right? Your water is special here, and your overall density is right in the mix. It's above the Upper Snake and the Madison, a little under the Henry's Fork. That's no surprise. The hatches on the Henry's Fork are just kind of unreal. And then kind of mixing those two, the density of your mayflies, stoneflies, and caddis. Again, right in the mix. Under the Henry's Fork, but above the Upper Snake and the Madison. So what this should tell you is that things are changing. There are problems in the watershed, but it's not dead, and it's a long ways from dead, okay? So I want to go back before I end to this slide. Changing flows. Right now, we're just talking about these samples of immature insects, the nymphs and larvae per square foot. But you're observing, many of you, big problems in the overall abundance of hatches. And I want to explain kind of a disconnect. A lot of the time when we monitor bugs from an invertebrate perspective, from the nymphs in the water, everything looks good. But the adults, they seem to be a lot less abundant than they used to be. And I'm going to try and explain that. So flows have decreased over time. Keep that in your mind. So right now, when you look at our river, these aquatic insects, especially the sensitive ones, like high flow. So if this is your channel in the summer, you're going to have this stretch of optimal flow habitat. Fast flow, lots of oxygen, lots of food moving around, bugs are happy, there's lots of them. And then you have this wetted channel over here with poor habitat. Not much flow, not much depth, sediments collecting. There's not a lot of bugs over here, okay? But if you envision back in the day, in the summer, those that have been here for a long time, you know that your wetted width was bigger then, right? This cobble bar would have been filled in at least partially with water. Now it's not. So you can imagine historically, you had your historic optimal habitat was this wide and your poor habitat was over here. So even if your densities look the same, your invertebrates per square foot in the optimal habitat, your optimal habitat right now is less than what it used to be. So if you've observed declines in hatches, it makes sense. Your water quality is still supporting the same amount of bugs per square foot, but your total square footage to work with is less. Therefore, your production of bugs out of these riffles, out of these runs, out of these pools Well, really the riffles and runs is just less overall. So I wanted to say that because a lot of the time it's confusing when I say everything's looking good and your observation is maybe not that same thing. So water quality, again, is looking pretty good on the bigwood, but declines that maybe some of you have noticed in the hatches are not surprising despite high densities of your hatches. Cool? All right, so we're really excited to be working on this project. We have a lot of these similar projects going around across the country, but we're really excited to push these data out over the next number of years, collaborate with Project Bigwood, and it's through, education like this, creating reports, working with our agency folks, other nonprofits, where we can integrate the bugs, issues with water quality, issues with dewatering into our management and restoration plans, and do real world conservation. So that's pretty much the end of my talk. I want to give one shameless plug for our event tomorrow though. We have an angler entomology event. The Salmonfly Project cares deeply about your ability to match the hatch. One of the reasons for that is it's just plain fun, right? That's where it's special for us. But also, we notice this trend. The young guys are fishing chubbies and perdigons and they're not matching the hatch, right? And from a fishing perspective, I don't really care. They can have their fun in that way. But if we lose our population of anglers that are noticing their bugs, that are caring about them, this conservation thing isn't gonna last, right? So this is a paid event. All the proceeds go to Salmonfly Project conservation and our monitoring. If you can make it tomorrow, we're 10 a.m. to 12:30. Our location has changed because there is another, that old event space got snagged. We're gonna meet at 1023 War Eagle Drive at the park here in Haley. If you wanna sign up, go to salmonflyproject.org/events. The QR code is over there on my table. We're doing a paid event next year. I think we wanna do a bigger free event next year and have more people come. But if you can come to that, we want to teach you your entomology. We want to teach you the behavior of the bugs, how to think about these hatches, so you're not just out there, grinding away. You can make a plan and really knock it out. With that, I'd love to talk about any questions that you have. Thanks, Project Bigwood, Sawtooth Brewery. Let's talk bugs.